Hey, it's Roy Newgate, and we're back with another One Piece discussion. For this video, I wanted to talk about one of the most mystifying elements of the arc, and that's the identity of the 1% man that Hawkins was talking about, and whether or not it's Zoro. So, I'll lay out all the variables that come to mind, as well as some other people who this may pertain to, and you can decide for yourself in the end what makes the most sense. But before we dive into it, if this is your first time here, or you enjoy One Piece content like this, do me a favor and hit that subscribe button. Also, like the video as well, as that helps a lot too. I think before we try to figure out who the 1% man is, we have to first understand how Hawkins' power works. And one major thing about it is that his cards aren't meant to be used for prediction necessarily. Because if something he mentions doesn't come true, that doesn't mean he was wrong. It's probability, or the percentage chance of something happening. So if someone beats the odds when it comes to one of his readings, that just means they fell into the part of the reading with a lesser chance of happening. The only point in time in which his reading would be an outright prediction is if it's 0% or 100%, because at that point he is presenting it as an absolute certainty and not just a simple possibility. So even with this 1% man, there still exists a chance of survival depending on who it might be. Another thing we might need to consider is that Oda could be setting everything up to point in one direction, only for it to prove to be complete misdirection when he reveals who it actually is. Just like he made it seem like Queen was after Who's Who up until the chapter that it was actually revealed that it was Drake, although at the same time there was enough reasoning to suspect this as well. Ironically, it was in that same chapter that we learned about this reading, and we had very limited information back then, but in the 31 chapters since, we've had new details to consider and make a better guess at things. Now, some people might immediately guess that the 1% man is Kaido himself, with all the death flags he has in this arc, and how we know he has to die for all of this to end, but then it wouldn't line up with Hawkins' behavior. If it was truly Kaido, you would think he would have defected from the Beast Pirates by now, especially because he isn't a man that takes his own readings lightly. He always acts on whatever has the highest chance of success, and has done so without fail up until now. So it would be especially peculiar for him to foresee the high possibility of Kaido's death, but not act accordingly. But who knows, there could be another side of it that we're not seeing. People also consider Law as a prime candidate at one point, and that's mainly to do with the fact that Law's death as a whole was a popular theory even before we got to Onigashima. This was due in large part to his devil fruit ability, and how some thought the situation would be so dire that Luffy might be on the brink of death, and so he would need to use his eternal youth surgery to either bring him back to life, or save him from dying altogether, which would of course require him to sacrifice his own life in the process. I'm not sure what the consensus opinion is at the moment, but at this point it doesn't seem likely at all that it would be the case. And also, we still lack a lot of information on how the special ability works, but if we're going off the name alone, I don't think it even implies any sort of revival or healing. To grant eternal youth is to take away aging, and not to bring the dead back. And on top of all of that, Oda himself even said he hates the idea of reviving the dead in manga, so this honestly shoots the entire theory down completely. I will say though, when it comes to Law's devil fruit, I do think at some point in the series, the eternal youth surgery will be used, and that may be closer to the end of the series. I think by then Law will have found out the meaning of D and completed everything he wants to. At the same time, I don't think the surgery would have been mentioned at all if it wasn't going to be a relevant plot point at some point in the future. Now let's talk about the Kid Pirates a little. The crew has been met with so much misfortune throughout the New World. They went straight for the Emperors despite lacking greatly in resources and manpower. And as a result, you had Kid losing an arm and other possible losses they may have sustained. You had Kid and Killer getting tortured in Wano, and even Killer getting coerced into eating a smile fruit, and now he's dealing with the effects, which may prove to be irreversible. You might ask, why are the Kid Pirates always at the receiving end of all this bad luck? I think it may be possible that it has to do with Kid himself being based on the unluckiest pirate in history, William Kidd, and that all this misfortune could just be something that inherently comes with his character. Now, one thing we might need to consider is how far is Oda willing to go with this? How unlucky will Kid prove to be? Is it possible that he ends up losing his right-hand man entirely? Could Killer actually end up being the 1% man by the end of the raid? I think Wano will prove to be the greatest test, not just for the Kid Pirates, but also Oda, and we'll see how far he's willing to go with the consequences of this war, and who he's actually willing to kill or put in the position to the point that their chances of survival are 1%. Now, there's a certain individual that recently came to mind when trying to figure all of this out, and that's Who's Who. The reason being the fact that CP0 mentioned the possibility of needing to eliminate him to make a statement for the world government, since he was able to escape from one of their prisons. I'm not sure if it was specified if it was impaled down, but that would definitely give them more reason to kill him. And especially given the reputation of impaled down and how it would be even more tarnished if word got out that someone else escaped from there. CP0 has also been pretty much in the background of this whole raid as well, so at some point they might make their presence known by committing to this sole action. It will be pretty ironic too if that ends up being the case, since he was in the room when Hawkins made his 1% reading as well. And now there's Zoro. And honestly, I think Zoro has the highest chance out of anyone to be the 1% man. The variables weren't exactly in place to say this back during chapter 990, but now that we know by the end of this raid he'll be feeling double the effects of a double Yonko attack, it's hard to see how he doesn't end up in that sort of position where his survival is in complete question. I mean, the first time alone, 30 of his bones were broken, and he was in the worst position we've seen him since the pre-time skip. He shouldn't have even been able to stand, but pushed himself to perform when he needed to, and even took a Thunder Bagua on top of that. Before we even got to Onigashima, at one point I said to myself that by the end of this war, Zoro will be in even worse shape than he was during Nothing Happened. I didn't know how, but I just had a feeling that Oda would look to outdo that moment and the suffering that Zoro had to endure. And that's the thing with Zoro. This suffering is an integral part of his character. He welcomes it. It's the path that he's chosen, to endure it all and keep pushing despite the inherent risk that comes with forcing himself to perform. In every major arc, he's had to deal with something that's threatened his life on a greater scale than any other Straw Hat. Just look at Arlong Park, where even Arlong was shook with the thought that Zoro was able to move with the wound he sustained from Mihawk. It was to the point that he thought he had to eliminate a man like this because of the threat he posed. With the moment in Thriller Bark, he was already placed on the brink of death multiple times, but still willed his way through it and took on Luffy's pain. The injuries still were so severe that he was still feeling them the next arc and collapsed in front of an admiral while fighting. So if he dealt with all of that before even getting to the Yonko saga, it just goes to show what he'll experience will be on a completely different level, and he'll deal with an insane amount of punishment to the point that him living will be up in the air in the eyes of those around him. His chances of survival will be all the way down to 1%. And it's not like he'll just have to deal with what he endured on the roof. He'll probably have even more damage he'll have to sustain with whatever fights he's in after he's gotten up with the recovery shot. And all of that would just be added together on top of everything else and doubled. Now earlier in the arc, Hawkins said that the chances of Luffy and Zoro making it to the end of the month is 19%. And you might say since this reading was already made for them, that means Zoro couldn't possibly be the 1% man. But I think it's especially important to consider that we don't know what might affect his readings, and if the percentages can go up and down depending on whatever aspects might change. Like one thing I can think of is that the arrival of Big Mom to Onigashima may have changed the odds for a variety of things. Two emperors on one island fighting on the same side, I'm sure that a lot of people instantly had their fates altered by something like that. One thing I've been thinking about a lot for Zoro specifically is the fact that he now wields two cursed blades, and for normal people one would already be dangerous enough to hold. So maybe now that he has both Enma and the Sandai Ketsetsu, that may have altered his fate to the point that he's in his current position. I think we also have to consider how all of this will affect Zoro later on, because the consequences surely have to be heavier than anything we've ever seen him face. I've seen many people suggest that he may even be out for an entire arc, and although I kinda doubted that at first, that might prove to be true since we haven't even seen the full scale of repercussions. And what we've already seen and what we know is already enough to warrant this, honestly. We'll just have to wait and see how it all plays out though. But those are all my thoughts on why I think that Zoro is most likely the 1% man that Hawkins was talking about. But as always, I would love to hear what you all think. Do you think that it's Zoro, or do you have anyone else in mind that you think has more reasoning, or that the clues point more towards? Make sure to comment all your thoughts down below, but also subscribe to the channel and like the video as well.